Hello, hello, it is that time of year, it is Microsoft Ignite, and therefore we have a whole giant pile of announcements in the data and AI space. So I want to do my normal thing, I want to take a look at the book of news, and then several other sources of announcements, tie it all together, and say, hey, what has changed in the world? Now, I'm not going to run through everything, because actually there's a huge amount in Synapse Analytics that has gone out, and that's where I want to focus. So we'll touch on one or two of the other bits and pieces, but the main story is a gigantic list of new features that have gone into Synapse Analytics that you'll see as of this week. Now, there's things such as a new compute engine. So we've got SQL Spark, there's a new one. There's things like Delta support for serverless going GA. That's a massive one for me, because I love Delta so much. Basically, there's a lot of new features in there. So we're going to take a step through, talk about what you're going to see, talk about what it means to me. Very opinionated. You get my opinion, that's all it is. If you're new around here, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Say hello down in the comments. And I'd love to hear what people actually think. Some of the features I'm like, yes, that's awesome. Some of the features I'm like, who's that for? And yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of get people's opinions in terms of where we're sitting. So without further ado, let's dive into the book of news first. And then we'll start looking at other places because there's lots of updates kind of spread around, shotgunned all over the place. So, book of news. Now, this is a thing that Microsoft have been doing for the past couple of years. Whenever they have a big conference, they accept the fact that there are masses of sessions and announcements, and it's easy to get lost in that huge agenda. So they've started doing this book of news, which is, here's all the things that we've announced. This is a list of everything that's happened. There's some really good stuff in there. You can go through the AI ones, things like cognitive search, getting more languages. Cognitive search is that great metadata trawling. If you've got hundreds, thousands of documents and you want something to scroll all the way through them and then say, well, that one's talking about this topic, this one's talking about this topic, here are the terms that are referenced in there, and apply semantic meaning to them, and then you can search over the top of it. Awesome. It's really cool. Getting more language just means it's more usable and it's more actual globally useful for people. There's a few things like that, a few kind of improvements in cognitive services, a few changes to the development models, a few changes to Cosmos DB and Cassandra going into managed instance. Lots of interesting stuff, not what we're here to talk about. So this section is where we're at. So there's a fairly small Synapse Analytics section in the book of news. There's three main points they talk about. They talk about this whole idea of database templates. And it makes me a little nervous, honestly. So database templates is this idea of saying, I've got a load of data in a lake. I still want to visualize my database diagram. I still want to have relationships and kind of bring on table definitions and do all of that data modeling, which is awesome. People aren't bad at doing that in lakes. So ability to do that kind of thing is fantastic. But then the thing they've got on top of that is this idea of database templates. So you'll see in a lot of industries, there's always the canonical model. I want to go and get kind of a template for retail, and I'm a retailer. What should my database look like? And you get these absolutely massive, sprawling data models. You can say, right, I'm going to apply the retail data model to my business. And then you have to spend months of effort plugging it in to make your data look like that data. And then you can plug in a load of extra stuff that are built to sit on top of these models. So they're very useful. For me, they tend to be a bit enterprisey. They tend to be, you need to be of sufficient size and complexity to actually get any of the benefits from adopting those models, honestly. But super interesting and a really good reference point to be able to go, what do other people describe that? When people are talking about a product, how do people describe a product? Hey, look, here's a load of tables and references and attributes that people talk about. A very kind of dynamics, Dataverse-y kind of way of looking at the world. Makes sense that we're seeing that plugged into Synapse. That's one thing. We'll have a quick look at that. Real-time analytics for telemetry and time series on log data. So that is the new engine. That is Data Explorer. So you might know Azure Data Explorer just as a completely separate tool inside Azure. That is now embedded inside Synapse as a different compute engine. You say, hey, I want to go and trawl some logs, spin up your Data Explorer pool, and then start writing KSQL or KQL, Presto query language. And you can go and do that kind of log exploration. And super interesting. It's a different way of doing things. And I really like the fact that they've introduced it with that use case. Real-time analytics for telemetry, time series, and log data. That is what it's for. Because we've had the problem with kind of some previous Synapse things where they've brought in a new tool and they haven't really explained where you should be using it. People are like, well, where should I use Spark versus serverless versus dedicated? And it's like, here are the options, but not what the options are for. So it's great that from the get-go of this being introduced, it's like, this is what it's for. It's for diving into vast swathes of logs and time series and doing that kind of analysis. Right. we've got that new engine. And then there's some stuff about Event Hubs Premium. So it's basically a enhanced linked service for connecting to Event Hubs for pulling data into Synapse and doing real-time streaming queries. And there isn't really that much else talking about Event Hubs Premium in the rest of the announcements. They're the three major ones that we see, and that's barely scratching the surface of some of the other things that have been released. And that's all we get in the book of news for data and AI. And there's some stuff, SQL Server 2022, other things like that. Things, but from a big data analytics, the stuff I care about, there's actually only those three main points. So if we dive and look elsewhere, so there is obviously the main actual conference. You can still register to Ignite. You can still see the sessions on the backlog. You can go watch on demand. You can see kind of Kim Manus talking about all these different announcements and what they actually mean and what they're for. There are some quite crazy demos. Crazy demos, such as using Data Explorer over 100 terabyte log pile with 400 billion rows, and then just getting back sub-second queries on that, which is cool, impressive. Kind of falls into the slight Microsoft trap if they go, hey, look how impressive our things are, and they pull out this many terabyte, 100 terabyte query, this petabyte query, this trillion row data set, and they go, look how big it can go, and everyone's like, oh. Well, that's too big. We don't need that. And it kind of just puts people off that they're focused on these massive use cases rather than, everyone's actually got a use case for this. And you can go really small and it's really flexible. It's quite cheap and it's easy to use. No, it's the big, massive, look at me use case that we see. But it's still a very impressive demo. So definitely, I do advise watching that session and just getting that kind of firsthand, putting these announcements in context. Now, to go along with that, there was some announcements on the Synapse news page. So there is now, finally, hallelujah, in one place, a just feed of here's all the announcements to do with Synapse. And we saw that last month. We had the very first of the monthly updates. So the October update with here's what happened in October. So useful to finally see all this stuff in one place. And there is one for Ignite. This is pulling together the different announcements from the Synapse team saying, or teams, all of them, saying here's all the different interesting things that's happening. And it's here where we've got a lot more detail about what's actually been released and what's going on. So obviously, log and telemetry analysis, the new compute engine is a big story. So we now have this idea sitting in the middle of things. You've got SQL, you've got Spark, you've got Data Explorer. It is a new pool. And you can go and use that now. So if we dive into Synapse, we can dive into Manage. We've got this Data Explorer pools is something we can now see. Yes, I would like a Data Explorer, please. Do you want it to be storage optimized? Basically, larger memory can hold more data, or compute optimized. I want it to be fast because it's looking at things. It's kind of doing things like real-time querying. So pick your thing, pick your size, and then the next page, pick how many you want. I don't know why they've separated the number of nodes from the size, unlike all the other things like Spark, where you say, pick my size, pick how many I want. A few different pages here, but it's fine. A number of instances, how many blocks do I want in my server? You can go all the way to 1,000 nodes in your Data Explorer query. Basically, it can scale. I think that's the main message there. And then how do you want it to be? Should it be looking for streaming? Should it be looking for just looking over a load of existing logs? Configure your thing, you set it up. And then part of that as well, you've got kind of knocking around, you've got those other pieces. So you can now say, I would like to do a new KQL script. It's cool. So you can go and write kind of the KQL directly in Synapse now. And you've also got this idea of over in the databases, kind of separated out. We've got this whole lake databases and SQL databases. We'll get into that in a bit. And we're going to see this Data Explorer database. We're going to see this ability to have this other separate idea, this other type of querying, essentially save views over all of your logs, and we'll see that going in. So you can already see that inside Synapse now. You can see Data Explorer, you can go and have a play. If you're using Data Explorer currently, you can say, well, if I'm using Synapse, I'm using Data Explorer, I might as well bring it in and then have one joined up view of the world. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, the other thing is Synapse link for Dataverse. Again, not mentioned. I don't think that was mentioned at all in the book of news. That's quite a big thing. On there. So Synapse link, if you've not seen it before, so that was something that was available for Cosmos DB. So essentially, if you had Cosmos DB, which is very good OLTP, like super fast concurrent reads and writes, trying to do analytics on it, it's not very good. It's quite slow. You have to suck all the data up, then do your analytics, and then it's all right. What Synapse Link does, it just kind of makes a halfway house, basically a mini data lake that's managed for you. You don't even see it. But you say, I would like you to automatically make column store versions of my data, geared up for analytics, and And then straight from Synapse, you can go, I want to run a query on my Cosmos DB, and I'll use the analytics bit in the middle. That goes so much faster. Essentially, auto lake ingestion, so you can do real-time querying or a couple of minutes off real-time querying against things like Cosmos. This new announcement is saying they've done the same, but for Dataverse. So you're going to actually see that if you're using Dataverse currently, the thing that used to be common data model, common data service. So if you're using Dynamics heavily and you're storing all your data inside that, and you say, yeah, I want to link this up, make this table available in Synapse so you can just query over it directly, rather than have to land it in the lake and install the drivers to read the manifest files and do all that kind of stuff. No, just Synapse link directly over Dataverse. You can suddenly go and query it directly. And that's one of the major powers of Synapse. Compared to other tools, the integrations that you can get with Synapse is what the killer feature is. And it's good to see more things being added into it. Okay, cool. Database templates. The thing I mentioned had a bit of a grumble at these big giant enterprise models. And that's part of this separation. Part of this idea of going, I've got a lake database, I've got a SQL database, is tying into that. So I can go, I want to have a new lake database, or I have a new thing. And again, not database because it's stored in the lake. All your data will be stored as folders and files inside a data lake store. We can say, yes, I would like a lake, please. What do I want to call my database? Which lake do I want to go and create it on? Where should it go inside there? So where should this folder structure live inside my lake? And then the thing that makes me so sad, is should it be a limited text or Parquet? Am I storing it as CSV or Parquet? Not Delta, not any nice, good, modern lake format. Just, well, I mean, Parquet is great, but if you're trying to do a load of automated engineering through Spark, Parquet is not good enough these days. So interesting to see. I mean, I'm assuming this is based on some of the same technology as kind of CDM kind of stuff, and it's going to build out that structure for us. I've not had a play yet. I'll do a video in a bit. But yeah, interesting to see how it actually structures it, and if it's going to be able to support other file formats, or if that's your lot. Yeah, it's kind of puts it back to being a fairly rudimentary lake structure if we can only use those two file formats. Either way, we pick our thing. We say, I would like a new table, please. Just add a table. We can go in, we can design it, we can give it columns, and it brings back lots of memories. It's been a long time since I designed a table using a table designer. And you can go and create it. You can give it kind of normal Sparky kind of data types, and you build basically a lake structure. So you can do that. You go off and build things. Or you could say, hey, I want it from a template. And it says, well, okay, which of the many giant enterprise models do you want? You can go into retail. I would like to a retail one, please. Please find a continue button. And it'll go off and say, right, I'm going to get all the different templates for tables that you could possibly actually use. Then inside there, okay, you've got so many of these different tables, and they're all very normalized. So, for like an analytics model, it's really not an analytics model. It's very much a gigantic, like enterprise data warehouse Inman style thingy. So I can go, I want you to go and apply my retail template, and it's going to go and create automatically, which is quite impressive, 440 different tables here in this gigantic business model. Now, I don't imagine most people going, yes, okay, let's start with that. Start with 400 tables and I'll fit my data to it. You'd be picking out certain segments of it going, right, we're doing this little business process. We're doing this small area of it. So again, we had filters there going, right, okay, I'm not bringing everything in. I just want to understand customer. What do I need for customer? And I'll bring in the tables that are related to that. Still fairly complex model. So super interesting that it's in there. Super useful for some things in terms of benchmarking your schemas against it. Don't know how many people are going to leap in and then suddenly adopt that as their giant enterprise model, because it's a very, I say old school way of doing things, but it's a very old school way of doing things. Picking up this off-the-shelf model and applying and getting all your data to shape to it, rather than having a quite small, streamlined data model that fits your actual business. Interesting, but having a graphical data designer directly over lake models is awesome. Really, really cool. What I would like, the thing that I would love to have on there, so we can actually, as part of that, if I just go back to bringing in that lake database, I can bring in existing things from my lake. And I can go and point at a table I've already saved, which is like, oh no, I don't want to have to have created external tables everywhere. What I would like, using the Purview integration, is to say, grab all of my lake objects of this type in this area, do a search, tick, 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 register all these things, have them appear in my data model, do some quick dragging to establish relationships, hit save, have them register as views rather than tables, maybe. We'll see, it depends on serverless versus Spark. And then we could actually go from there. That's what I would like. I would like to apply this whole tool, this kind of graphical data modeler to my existing data that I've got there through engineering practices, rather than this is the thing creating the things and I have to map my stuff into it. That's kind of where I'd like to go, but we'll see. It's interesting area and new features that we're not seeing in some other tools, which is cool. Hey, what else do we have? So Spark. So from the Spark side, the main announcement that we've had is that in the next week or so, we'll be seeing the ability to have, in where we've currently got the node type is memory optimized. Essentially, it's picking the type of Azure VM this is running on. Memory optimized normally means D series, which means it's got a fairly kind of a large amount of RAM compared to CPU. What we're expecting to see is this idea of hardware accelerated, is what they call it, GPU enabled, essentially. You're picking the boxes that have got the NVIDIA GPU chips in it, which is really, really good for training certain types of data science model. You're building a machine learning model, and that can actually feed in to the GPU to do massively accelerated training and inference, then they're great for that. It's not good for everyday stuff. Certainly wouldn't expect anyone to be using that to do like data engineering and data prep and all kinds of stuff. It's a very expensive way to do things, but it's something that has been missing on the Synapse Spark side of things, is that kind of bigger model, deep learning that can actually benefit from the GPUs. So yeah, interesting to see. It's not in there yet. The thing that was more interesting to me is this little button, this little sneaky thing that popped in, and dynamically allocate executors. Because one of the main things that we've had with the way Spark pools work is your session locks down the executors. So your session goes, right, these are my machines. No one else is allowed to use these machines while I'm running. And that's while my session's turned on. So if you're doing things like, if you had a for each loop and you threw 20 Synapse notebooks to run, it would then do the first one, finish, close the session, do the next one, finish, close the session. And it's not really utilizing the executors as much as it could do. So this is saying, well, actually, as soon as I actually don't need an executor, free that up, put it back to the cluster. Now, I've not had to play with that at all, but if that is actually making it a little bit more flexible, a little bit more dynamic, actually, we can have several sessions running at the same time because they don't need the full executor at the same time, and actually have it switching those machines between people. That's going to make your usage of the Spark pools much more efficient, much more cost efficient, because actually you won't be holding up some machines if your query is only using a couple of slots. It'll actually be dynamically moving it between it. Not had to play with that at all, but that is very interesting as one of the major issues with the Spark pools today. Very, very cool. Snuck in. It's not mentioned in any of the announcements. It's just there now. Hooray! We'll see how that actually works. So yeah, very cool. And there's some other bits in terms of Spark. In terms of, have we actually got that mentioned anywhere? Yeah, so machine learning, there we go. We've got some things in there. We're not going to skip over this one. So we've had Delta Lake. Delta, my favorite file format. This thing which takes Parquet files, adds in a transaction log, gives you the ability to have an audit trail, to have a backup restore, to have time travel, to have merge statements and normal kind of SQL style update, insert, delete from on top of Parquet data, which is huge from an engineering point of view and just a general lake management point of view. So Delta has for a long time been how we build lakes. And it wasn't possible to query it in Synapse. Earlier this year, it came out in preview for serverless. So you could do it, but you wouldn't really do it in production. It's like use at your own risk. And getting that as GA status is great. That just means that there is a way of serving Delta directly from the lake that is GA. It is now generally available, use it in production. It has all the normal Microsoft SLAs and support behind it, which is, again, a big thing that allows people to adopt it and use it in anger. So great news. I'm very, very happy for that. Well done to the team. And yeah, exciting to see how it goes and see how it matures and see how they add in more support for the other parts of Delta, like time travel and all those good things. Machine learning. So that is a load of cognitive services that have been onboarded into Synapse Automatic. So you can call them directly from Spark pools, which is very, very cool. And there wasn't too much details on that. You can go and dig in and just get the normal documentation. But then sneaking around, the other place you can get updates now is you've got this little updates button if you're just directly in Synapse. You can dive in and say, right, what's happening in here? And you get this whole list of this is the stuff that's gone on. This is what's new in the tool. There's something we've seen, so you can see GPU accelerated Spark pools. The predict keyword in Spark, hadn't seen that. That's not mentioned in any of the updates. But if you're doing ML batch scoring, you can use the predict functionality similar to how you would if you're using SQL Server embedded models. Tells you about some cognitive services as a linked service. They can plug directly into your linked cognitive services linked service from inside Synapse then call it from there. And it talks about some of the ones that are then available. So translator, form recognizer, some of those ones are now actually available through the service directly from Spark pools. Again, very cool. As we said, the biggest thing that we get to see in Synapse as the real kind of USP is integrations to the wider Azure ecosystem. Seeing cognitive services is much easier to call and integrate with from inside Spark. Great. What we want to see. It's good. A few other things. Pandas now supports AWS Gen 2 in Synapse Spark. So if you're using straight Pandas and you want to go and just query things that are in your lake, you can now do that directly within Spark. Now, you shouldn't. Don't do that, but you can, which is great. Essentially, Pandas, because it runs using straightforward traditional Python libraries, doesn't actually run that efficiently on a Spark executor. Spark is based in Java, so if you're writing things that are not compilable down into Java, such as Pandas, it's going to run in the interop, so slightly outside the executor, and that just slows down your query slightly. So you're perfectly fine if you're doing data exploration, you're having a play around, you're doing some data science. If you're trying to write a performance job, be a little careful using straight Pandas. We saw in Spark 3.2, they've got the Pandas API, which is koalas, which is Spark-friendly Pandas, eggs directly in. Don't believe that is what that's talking about. I think that's just talking about traditional Pandas, in which case, use koalas instead. Koalas is a open source library, which takes the same Pandas functionality. It's got about 80-odd% feature parity, but it works properly in Spark and distributes across your executors. So, yeah, need to see what that announcement's actually about. You can do row rejection in CSVs using serverless. Good, great. And hopefully you've done most of your engineering, landed your data as nice, good Delta tables, and then you're just querying it via serverless. But it's up to you what you're doing with. Fine. Querying Delta is now GA, good. Open row set. So if we're in a serverless SQL query and we said open row set from, and we give it a path, and we can only give it one path, we give it a folder and it load data from there. We can now give it multiple paths. I don't really know why you'd be giving it multiple paths and treating it as a single data set from there and there and a bit of there and a bit of there and a bit of there. Don't really know when you'd be doing that if you have prepared your lake properly. So if you've gone through proper data engineering, curated the lake and pull that together, you wouldn't really be doing that. But if you're using serverless as your data discovery, someone said, right, there's a landing zone with blob storage, we've got loads of data, go and figure something out, and you're trying to stitch together different updates of things and it hasn't been prepared for you, definitely a use case is definitely kind of a useful thing we can do. Not really where we see serverless, but kind of up to you as how you're using it. Other stuff, you can now bring back 200 gig of results from serverless SQL, because it used to be 80, which is a huge amount of data to be retrieving. But I guess if you're using serverless as your integration point, plugging other tools to go talk to serverless, get the data back from it, you can now return a huge amount more data from it, which is good. All of the different product recommendations. So kind of plugging, again, this is what we're talking about in terms of why you might want to use some of those enterprise data models, is if the solution accelerators are plugged directly into them, you can benefit from them. So there might be a lot of work to plumb into it, but you can plug things in that would actually work. And it's like, up to you whether that be worth the effort. Data Explorer now in public preview. So that's kind of now something we can have a play with. Templates, lake templates using the database designer. That's all the stuff that we've seen. So loads and loads and loads of announcements there. So across Book of News, with the premium event hub, which doesn't seem to be mentioned anywhere else, the actual kind of blog Ignite announcements page, which has kind of a fairly detailed overview of everything, and then the updates tab in Synapse. We've got 3 different views of what's going on, but at least we have this information, whereas previously it was kind of not really there at all and we didn't know what was going on. So it's fantastic to actually see this real emphasis on telling us what's going on, telling us what the new features are, allowing us to tie them all together. But lots and lots and lots of stuff going on in Synapse today. Okay, rant over. That's all the stuff. That's all the stuff I'm aware of. There might be some more that have snuck in. There seems to be just tons and tons and tons of things that have been waiting for Ignite to go, right, it's time. Let's get all of our announcements, let's get all of our updates, let's get all of our new features out in the wild so we can go and play with it. And yeah, interesting stuff. Really, really curious which of those various things are the things you've been waiting for. So is it that actually I can get database diagrams, I can get the things I know and love of having a data model and apply that to lake data? Is it having Data Explorer as a new compute engine, something you can actually build in and use and you're using it elsewhere and you can now bring it in and have a part of that? Oh, have you been waiting for Dataverse to get easier to query from within Synapse? Are you doing all of your ML in Spark and it's been going slow and you're like, yes, we can finally use GPUs? Are you, like me, just excited about Delta? Kind of just how I roll. Let me know. Love to hear where people are at and what people are looking at. Definitely advise that you go and watch the demos, watch kind of the actual session, see the insane Data Explorer demo that is 100 terabytes of log data trawled in milliseconds, which is madness. Also probably quite expensive in terms of the size of that cluster. But even so, very, very cool. And yeah, let me know down in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And I'll be planning some videos to dig into some of these features in the future. Thanks for joining.